1, 2, 2, 2.
I'm not sure how well that, yes, the microphones are working a little bit better now. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Tidal Thames Navigators Club briefing. Thank you all for coming. And one thing to mention from the beginning, there is actually also an online audience tonight. This event is being live streamed and also recorded. And to the online audience, please use the Q&A function to ask questions if you have them. So we have quite a number of speakers. So my name's Miles Featherstone and I'm Deputy Harbour Master, and I'm just doing the introductions and question and answer session. My colleague David Alsop is Assistant Harbour Master, and he'll be talking to you on safety issues. We've also got the PLA Sports Manager here, Jenny Cooper, and she will explain more about what that role entails, because you might be curious about what a sports manager does. We also have some partners from the Met Police Marine Unit sat in the front row. Paul Jacobs is giving the talk, and we've also got Charmaine here this evening as well. And we also have a chap in yellow called Stephen, who is a volunteer at Tower Lifeboat Station, who will be talking to you, and I'm sure that you'll spot him very easily. And last but not least, we have Emily McLean from the PLA's Environment team. And just to say that I'm sure that you'll have quite a few questions, but please could you keep them in mind until the end, and then we'll have a joint question and answer session where you can ask questions of any of the speakers this evening or me. And once again, the online audience may ask some questions as well, which Jenny's going to be looking after, so we might have some questions coming through from online. So without further ado, just one final thing to mention, as we call it housekeeping, we're not expecting any fire alarms this evening. So if there is one, your emergency exit is just over there with the green light or behind you. So now moving on to the main evening. So first off is my colleague, David Alsop, Assistant Harbour Master. Thank you, David.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Miles, for the introduction, and thank you all for coming. After the last 2 years of COVID, it is excellent to have a face-to-face in-person event again. I'm sure you all agree. And also, it is good that this year, it looks like we can have the first season of recreational boating and getting back afloat again for a couple of years without worrying about whether the regulations will change again next week. So I'm sure we're all very pleased at that, and it's great to be here this evening. As up there, I'm Assistant Harbour Master. My particular role at the PLA involves liaising with yacht clubs and recreational boaters and mariners. I have colleagues who work with me in this, and we split the areas up, but I'm the gentleman here this evening to talk to you about this, and a few slides to show you. I just want to start by saying that the PLA's, our main focus, of course, is safety on the river. We have other responsibilities, other duties that are imposed on us, but number one is safety. We really care about safety. Our ambition is to be the safest port. Now, that is really what we want, what we strive for, and that's the message I want to impart to you all here tonight. We really care about safety. That is safety from the 400-metre, 16-metre draft, ultra-large or mega-max container vessels we're now handling, to the smallest recreational craft and rowing boat between Teddington and Richmond. We really do care about that, biggest to smallest. It really matters. My own role does encompass matters like accident investigation when incidents happen, particularly involving recreational craft, but also other vessels, or wherever there's any sort of conflict between recreational mariners and commercial craft. It might well end up on my desk to take that forward and try and find a resolution. So what I'd like to share with you this evening, a few slides, focus mainly on safety. These are what we might call lessons that we have learned from our investigations and our liaison with mariners, recreational and commercial on the river, to see what we can bring forward and communicate back to you in the interest of keeping you safer. Now, I am sure you're all very responsible boaters. The fact you have joined the Tidal Thames Navigators Club, the fact you have come along to our event this evening and given up your time to come here and listen to us shows me you must be very responsible boaters. So I am sure you know the detail of what I'm going to say. You will have heard it before and have already learned it. And if I am repeating stuff you already know, please accept my apologies. But I hope that there is something here that may be of some use to you that you can take away from this yourself or take back to your marina, boat club, yacht club, or whatever it is and share. So I'll push through these. And as I said, I hope there is something here of use for everybody. So the first, as we see at the top there, proper planning prevents poor performance. There are variations on that phrase, which I'm sure you have heard, which are not suitable for this event tonight. But as you can see there, it is self-explanatory. You prepare well, and hopefully it will go well. So what I want to talk about in particular are what we might call passage planning or voyage planning. You know, as recreational mariners, there are actually very few regulations that apply to you compared to those regulations that apply to large commercial vessels, especially the very largest. And maybe that is the attraction of the activity, why you like getting afloat on your boat, that you can enjoy yourself and pit yourself out against the elements, use your skills and enjoy yourself with a new challenge. And there are very few regulations that do apply. But some of those, and I'll start here, SOLAS, which is the Safety of Life at Sea Convention, which is an international convention between countries laying down minimum safety standards for ships. And it was actually the first iteration of it came out in the wake of the Titanic disaster in 1912. It has been amended many, many times since. And as I said, the vast majority of it is not applicable to you. You are well under 500 gross tons. You're not commercial, you're not crossing oceans, you're not taking pilots. So the vast majority of it is not applicable to you. But what I will look at, SOLAS Chapter 5, Regulation 34, which requires all vessels, including recreational craft, to engage in proper voyage planning. Now, what's meant by that? You're planning for purposes of safe navigation and the avoidance of dangerous situations. What we also look at is the MGN number 489 from the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, which summarizes the requirements which do apply to recreational craft. There's not many, but I would encourage you, if you haven't already, get hold of MGN 489, put it into a popular search engine, and you will find it very easily. And that will summarize from the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency the mandatory requirements for recreational craft, such as voyage planning. What we're looking for when it comes to this voyage planning, it doesn't mean that you're going to have to spend hours planning something for your little passage out on a weekend. It could be the case that you do your passage planning and then you keep that plan, you keep it updated. Once it's done, it can be reused every time, as long as you're keeping it updated. If you think, why do I need a plan? I can assure you that if anything were to not develop the way you wish it to, that is when you will be very grateful for having that plan, having done your research and having the papers in front of you with your backup options so that you know where you can go, the depths of water, your clearances under bridges, what if you miss the tide, that you have considered these eventualities and have it in your plan, that you know what you can and cannot do safely. So when carrying this out, I'll just reference that we do expect that proper nautical charts and publications are used. We have investigated instances where things have gone wrong, and part of what has gone wrong is the fact that the skipper was using his mobile phone app to navigate on the river, or some other navigation app, and obviously that is not for use in navigation. If you're going to go out afloat, use the proper charts and publications which are reliable, which are kept up to date by you or purchased from a reputable chart agent. If you're going electronic, obviously make sure you have the latest editions. So using the correct resources is what you need to have the right information. In terms of your planning, what we need to do is anticipate known hazards and potential adverse weather. Adverse weather, you're going to check the weather forecast before you head out, but you have to know, how does that apply to your vessel? What can your vessel withstand? What can your crew cope with? How will your vessel handle and respond in it? And make your own judgment as to what type of weather you are and are not happy to go afloat in. In terms of the anticipation of known hazards, well, that will come out from your work on the charts and your passage planning, that you know what is out there. An important part of that would be, for example, our notices to mariners that are published by the PLA that might give information to you about, for example, river closures because of an event, or arch closures or exclusion areas that have been established. And unless you're checking these notices to mariners, the first you'll know about it is when our harbour service launch has a quiet word with you for entering an exclusion zone. So that is what we're looking for in that. Lastly, what certainly I was taught, the old APEM of how to do a passage plan: appraise, plan, execute, and monitor. Appraisal, you're sitting down, what information do I need? What charts, what number charts do I need? What publications are applicable? Which tide tables, which tidal stream atlas, which list of lights, whatever is applicable to you when you're passage planning. You've appraised it, you've gathered the data you need, then you carry out the actual planning. Followed by that, you execute the passage and monitor as you go to make sure you're sticking to it. I'm sure that has been taught at maritime colleges and on short courses. And if you've already heard that, I'm sorry again for repeating it back to you. But something as simple as that, doing a little bit of work on your kitchen table before going afloat, could really make a massive difference to keeping you safe on the river. You're prepared and you've planned ahead. So that was one matter, passage planning. I hope we've covered that. Moving on to the next issue we'd like to cover is a topic I've called right kit and right attitude. As we said, there may not actually be that much kit that you absolutely have to have. If you're on a big ship, you can certainly expect a safety inspector to turn up and make sure you've got the right number of fire hoses, the right number of life rafts, to make sure the life jacket lights are working and so on. It's very unlikely you're going to face that sort of safety inspection, but that doesn't, just because you're not obliged to have that kit, does not mean that it is a good idea to go without it. Just because it is not absolutely mandatory and required by law, does not mean you can leave it behind and forget about it. Have the kit that you need to keep you and your passengers and crew safe. If that means going above and beyond the bare minimum, then that's what you have to do. If you are the skipper or a master of a vessel and are responsible for the safe handling and conduct of that vessel and for the safety of all the persons on board, then that's a small ask that you have the right kit, the right equipment, the right quantities, that the kit is in good condition. I'm sure the RNLI might touch on this. One of their safety messages recently was life jackets useless unless worn. Life jackets, of course, can be real lifesavers, and it's no good having some lovely life jackets in pristine condition, still in their original packaging, underneath a bench somewhere in the cabin. If you need them, if they're on board, they should be used and ready to go at any time if they're not actually being worn. And that applies to whether that's your little fire extinguishers, your torch, your handheld VHF, or whatever piece of safety equipment it is. You don't just have it, it's in good condition, it's ready for use, and you check it before you use it or before you need it. It's no good finding out the torch batteries are dead, or you don't know how to program your complicated VHF when you suddenly need it. So make sure that you have the kit, you know how to use it, and it's ready to go anytime. And that focuses on the kit part of it, but that does tie into the attitude. If you've got the right attitude, you will make sure you've got the right kit. So talking particularly about what we might call the attitude, know the limitations of your own vessel. And we mentioned that earlier about the weather factors, that I'm sure there's some people who love going out and getting some spray on them and enjoying the windy weather. Is that really wise in your boat? In some cases, yes, the boat might well be very capable of it and you're maybe a very capable skipper, but is that really what you want to do? Is that safe? And that's always the question in the back of your mind. Is this safe? Is my plan going to get me home safe tonight along with my passengers? Will I be endangering other people or endangering people, whether that's the Marine Police, the RNLI, or our own crews having to come and give you assistance if you get into a difficult situation? I'll push on to another couple here. Obviously, we'd like everyone to be courteous river users. And if you find yourself in a situation where someone is not being a courteous river user, obviously you're going to keep yourself safe, and by all means, report it into us and we can consider if that is a matter we wish to take further, should it actually endanger your safety or violate a regulation on the river. Finally, and this was a lesson that I was taught, well, a number of years ago, if you are in doubt, then there is no doubt. If you have any doubt in your mind, do I have enough time to get across? Is the weather just a bit too strong? Is the boat, if you are in doubt, there is no doubt. Do not do it. Never hesitate to take the safest course of action. If that is a boring weekend where you don't go afloat, then I think that is a better outcome than finding yourself taken to an ambulance by the RNLI. So having covered right kit and right attitude, and I hope that for this you understand what we mean by having the right attitude, and that is obviously an attitude that you enjoy yourself on the river, have a good time, and we're very, very happy to see recreational mariners afloat. The river is for everyone, and provided that everybody gets along, and these are some suggestions to keep everyone safe, I think obviously it will reduce my workload in terms of incident and accident investigations. Pushing on, checks and maintenance. If I asked you to complete that sentence, breakdowns and equipment failures are, should we all have something different? What the PLA firmly believes they are: dangerous and preventable. We have investigated several incidents where recreational craft, and yes, it does happen to commercial craft as well from time to time, but we've had instances where recreational craft have found themselves in very dangerous situations because they were fully expecting that outboard to start and it didn't. And this does come back to our right kit and right attitude. Check it before you need it. And it's no good realizing that your outboard doesn't actually start very well or is very unreliable when a big ship is bearing down on you and you urgently need to get out of his way. Hopefully you're not going to be in that situation, but that is a bad time to find out that you really should have checked that motor before you went afloat that day. So they are dangerous and entirely preventable. Simple checks, inspections, maintenance, servicing will severely reduce the risk of an unexpected failure, which could put you in a dangerous situation. As we said, right kit, right attitude. The right attitude here is making sure this servicing is done, the checks are done before you go afloat. The right kit is that the gear itself is in proper order and you are willing to potentially trust your life to it when you go afloat on the river. Carriage of an anchor, it is actually mandatory with some exceptions under our bylaws for all vessels to carry an anchor and suitable chain, warp, cable and so on, so that should you have one of these engine failures and find yourself in a tricky spot, at the very least you may be able to put the vessel to anchor somewhere instead of drifting through the navigable channel in the river, where you might well get into a very difficult situation with a larger vessel. So it is mandatory, and that again is back to our right kit and right attitude, that you are checking that, you know where it is, you know how to use it, it's in good order, and you don't go afloat without it. Lastly, have backup plans. This comes back to our passage planning. What are your abort points? What will you do if things go wrong? What is your situational awareness like at every stage of your passage on the river? I can certainly relate a short story, obviously suitably anonymized. We recently had a recreational mariner who suffered an engine failure and required urgent assistance, which was provided to him by our own PLA Harbour Service launch. They picked him up and he was disabled and drifting in the river. They took him in tow and put him on the closest safe mooring, where he was properly secured alongside. It turned out to be quite an expensive private commercial mooring, and he got quite an invoice from the operator of that mooring. Now, that in a way is sort of down to him. We are not a taxi service, and we won't tow people exactly where they want to go. We will remove dangerous vessels which are obstructing the river and get people to safety and put them on the closest safe mooring. In the past, there may have been longer distance tows undertaken by our harbour service launches and so on, but they are required to carry out their patrols and not to be diverted for a long period of time on a towing job, towing beyond what is necessary. So I think maybe that's a lesson that hopefully you've listened to the safety messages. This obviously could affect your wallet should you have one of these breakdowns and find yourself put alongside a commercial mooring somewhere. And until you get your motor repaired or arrange for your own tow away, that could really cost you quite a bit when you get the invoice. So that is a real incentive to have a backup plan ahead of time. In that particular case, that gentleman had some difficulty trying to locate a commercial operator to tow him away. Eventually, we were able to help with that and put him in touch with some people, and he was able to conclude a deal for a price and get towed away at his own expense. But if you had a breakdown and you had to get your phone out and phone someone with a properly licensed workboat to come away and tow you for a price somewhere, would you know who to phone, how to organize it? Where would you get them to tow you to? Or alternatively, if you need to get a repair technician out on the quick to get your engine fixed, do you have that number, and how quickly would he be there before you rack up quite a big bill on wherever our launch has put you? And I'm sure this is the same situation with the Met Police or the RNLI. It's not our job to tow you all the way back to your home mooring, but we will always see you in a safe position. If you had a breakdown on the motorway, it would not be the Highways Agency job to tow you all the way home. But if you were obstructing the road, I am certain they would have you removed as quickly as they could somewhere safe. And it is much the same for us. So hopefully that has been another point that people can take away from here and consider themselves in their planning, including their passage planning, and having the right kit and right attitude. The last matter I'm going to come on to now, my clicker works. So the reporting of incidents. As I mentioned, a lot of our lessons that I've shared with you this evening have come from incidents and accidents that have unfortunately occurred to people on the river. These are all investigated by us for the intention of preventing reoccurrence. We carry out safety investigations. Yes, from time to time, we may consider if we need to take shall we say, more robust enforcement action. It's very rare, and that's what I explain to people. The PLA are certainly not a police force, not a prosecution authority. We don't like it or intend to do that if we can avoid it, and very often education is the very best tool at our disposal to prevent any reoccurrence in the future. So that's the reason we carry out safety investigations. That does rely on people actually reporting incidents to us. But you'll note there, bylaw 8, yes, it is compulsory to make reports under certain circumstances, but we don't often have to rely on the compulsion of bylaws. We do rely on the responsibility of mariners afloat, that they know that they ought to report things, even if you think it doesn't look the best on you. What we want to take away from it, what lessons can be learned, and if there are matters we can share with other parties afloat, whether that's yacht clubs or marinas, boat clubs, so on, and share that information. If we need to make a tweak or a change to our publications, such as the recreational users guide that you were all offered this evening, and we can take that forward and see what we might need to do. We also highlighted there near miss reporting. We also want to receive reports of things that nearly happened but didn't. That is, we don't want to wait until someone has a nasty accident. We want to hear about when someone nearly has a nasty accident, that we can try and get something put in place before it ever gets the far distance of the nasty accident. So please report near misses. That is something that is not as strong in the recreational community. On commercial vessels, they fill in near misses, they have their own policies and procedures, and they put in plenty of near misses to us. We don't get quite as many from recreational boaters and mariners on the river. We do hear from you when something actually does go wrong, unfortunately, but we would like to hear ahead of that when something nearly goes wrong, whether that involves yourself on another vessel or whatever has happened. We want to hear about it. As we said, we're working to prevent reoccurrence. What we can do when we gather the data is conduct, shall we say, identification of patterns. If the same thing is happening in the same area, to the same type of craft, that is something we can take forward. I recently spoke to someone who had concerns about wash in a certain area of the river from large commercial vessels, and I explained that we're very willing to tackle that matter, but we do need reports. We need people to put in near misses. What actually happened? What time? What date? What was the name of the vessel that caused this wash? What was the effect of it? How severe was it? Once we have that data, we can see the pattern that develops and we can take that forward. As you can appreciate, nobody likes being accused of anything, and they're not likely to agree that we are right when we accuse them unless we have that folder of evidence of reports that we've investigated. And that is the other reason that we need these instant reports, near miss reports from yourselves. If you want things to change or be fixed, it must be reported to us. And overall, our objective is risk reduction, that we can amend our management systems of how we regulate and manage the river in the interest of safety, which brings me back to what I said at the start, that our absolute priority is safety on the river. And whatever we're doing, that is what it is directed towards. And you can see it's very faint there, but that is a screenshot of our online reporting system. You can now make all these reports online through your smartphone on our app and get them into us straight away. It only takes a few minutes to get the reports in. So that is all I have to say this evening. As I said, I'm sure most of you are already well aware of what I've just said. I've heard it before, but I hope there was something here of some use to you that you can take away and reflect on. And if there's anything you can obviously feedback to us. I have put any... just leave that there. So that's everything. We'll be taking questions at the end, and certainly if there are any, I'm happy to speak to you at that time. So I'll pass over now to Jenny, who's covering the next part of the evening. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So I'm the sports manager at the PLA, Jenny Cooper. A few familiar faces here tonight. Lovely to see those. And I'm your point of contact for recreational boating. So if I haven't spoken to you yet, please do catch me at the end online. I'm here to serve recreational boaters. My appointment was part of a commitment to the Thames Vision. So consider me your person. So I'll be touching on several topics this evening. First of all, the Thames Vision, our development framework for the Tidal Thames. Secondly, Active Thames, that's a partnership programme we have in place for developing water sports on the river. Improving access, diversity and inclusion is really key within that. And thirdly, Safer Thames, which is a partnership working together to prevent drownings on the river. Okay, so across to Thames Vision 2050. So we are right in the middle of our consultation on this at the moment. So I'm going to touch on a few of the key themes that we have. But I would very much like, as a takeaway, of course, we're following David's advice and the advice you'll have from the MPU and the RNLI as well. But please speak to us online, put forward your views as part of the formal consultation. It's all taken very seriously by us at the PLA. So, Thames Vision 2050. So, as you can see here, as a trust port, our principal role is to pass on the Thames to future generations in a better condition. Core commitment for us as part of Thames Vision 2050, and the consultation, as I've mentioned, is live. It will seek your view on the framework, themes, areas for action, and actions partners that will also take forward alongside the PLA. Informing and inspiring the consultation, we've conducted numerous studies, some of which are shown on the screen there, and we'll also, you can see a mention of a sports participation study, and I'll touch on those findings shortly when I move across to Active Thames. So we've summarised the consultation, we've summarised Thames Vision 2050 as 3 key themes. First up, trading Thames. So it's an essential cornerstone of the UK economy, country's largest port, 3rd year in a row, I think, and central to supply chains. We expect to see expanding transportation of light freight into central London, a progressive switch to net zero operations, and technological innovation actively embraced. I think tonight's a great example of this. Was an event that was only in person just 2 years ago, and now we have more people attending online than we do in person. So we can't underestimate technological innovation and advancement in everything that we're doing. Next, Destination Thames. The exciting bit, this is where my role sits. So more people living, working and relaxing on and around the Thames. The river is a national and international icon with more sporting and leisure opportunities and visitors accessing unique sports and culture. And we want to see that those accessing the river are truly representative of local and wider communities. And onto our third theme, Natural Thames. Cleanest river in generations, supporting more biodiversity and wildlife, balancing economic and natural capital value, with the Thames recognised for clean air, natural flood defence, and capturing carbon and nutrients as a valued, thriving habitat in itself, a key part of the wider Destination Thames attraction. And you will hear towards the end of the presentation, you'll hear from my colleague Emily about our work on litter specifically. And there are priorities that span across all three themes. No surprise to you there that safety is listed first, essential foundation for greater river use. Net zero, so we have a climate emergency and we need to respond to that. Sustainable economic growth, low carbon inland highway, habitats capturing and storing carbon are all options. Resilience, developing our infrastructure, systems and natural habitats robust to challenging events, including the impacts of rapid climate change. Technological change, fuels and infrastructure, ship and port technology, and access and inclusion, delivering more equitable access to river opportunities. So we will review and refresh after 5 years, which we did previously. So much of this will look familiar with the first Thames Vision, which was working to 2035. We're now working to 2050 in line with net zero targets. We'll have biennial main progress reports and interim updates, and we're likely to use the UN Sustainable Development Goals to track our progress against those measures. And we're considering creating 2 groups as well. So now that you've heard more, I'd like to encourage you to take part in the consultation. So we have key events shown on the screen there and dates, and you'll notice that one of them is actually tomorrow. Please do spread the word and do attend these events as well. Okay, so that's the Thames Vision covered. On to Active Thames. I hope that's not my phone that I've left it. Oh no, it's not me. On to Active Thames. So what is Active Thames? A partnership programme in place supporting development of water sports on the Tidal Thames and inland waterways in London, Kent and Essex. See some nice partner logos there. So we're working closely with London Sport, Active Essex and Kent Sport. So they're known as active partnerships. I think we have 43 active partnerships in England. They're all working to tackle inactivity and make sure people are more active at whatever level they may be. But their big focus is around tackling inactivity. So they're not necessarily focused on any particular sport, but they are looking across the region, and they've got really good insight and members on the ground, development officers, sporting officers, coaches, and lots of programs underway. So they're the ones we have for the Tidal Thames region. Then we have the NGBs, which I'm sure you're familiar with, British Canoeing, British Rowing and the RYA. And we have Canal and River Trust and the Thames Path National Trail, picking up the inland waterways and picking up walking and cycling too. So why are we looking at other waterways? Well, it's really important we recognise existing work in these areas. There's some great work going on in terms of best practice, fantastic places to introduce people to sport. Some might be easier to contain and keep safe than certain sections of the river. And I don't think we can look at growing sport on the tideway without factoring these locations in. So we're right next to one at the moment, Docklands Scout Project, Docklands Sailing Water Sports Centre being 2 examples of really good community focused sites. We need to build on these learning and best practice so that people entering the river have the confidence and competence to take on the tideway. So we have a partnership agreement in place that focuses the work of the partners. And in summer last year, we worked with London Sport consultancy team to run a participation and workforce study, which I know some of you here completed. Thank you very much for doing so. That not only feeds into the Thames vision, it actually has laid the foundations for programme development, so that everything we're doing as part of Active Thames is based on what people have asked for. I'm not making it up as I go along, I promise. So what did we find through the survey? So it was in two parts. The first was an online survey, and the second stage was an online community consultation piece, and that provided a lot more qualitative information, anecdotes, really gave people a chance to discuss. I'm going to focus on the qualitative section, which was the first stage. It's a little bit easier to represent as well. So focusing on that, we heard from a total of 942 people. 751 were participants, 76 were administrators, and 115 were coaches. I'd like to stress that in terms of language, we'd refer to participants and then group the administrators and coaches as workforce. Sport England terminology, but basically the people who help make sport happen. And we're aware that the contribution in this country of volunteers to that is absolutely phenomenal. We've got amazing work going on, led by volunteers, some of whom I know are here this evening. So what are our demographics looking like? So for participants, we're looking at about 60% male, 40% female, 5% from ethnically diverse communities. London in the 2011 census was at least 40% Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. So as a sport, we're definitely not reflective of the local population there, and there's much to do on that, particularly if you consider access and inclusion as one of those key themes there spanning across the Thames vision. Top barriers to participation, so this is what people told us stops them doing more physical activity. Biggest one was family and work commitments. That's what everyone says. They say they haven't got time to exercise. I can be guilty of that myself. Next up was access to the water, then distance from it, safety, river congestion, and cost. So they're the top findings around barriers there. Across to administrators, 65% male, 35% female, 3% ethnically diverse communities. Top three commonly most identified skill gaps were marketing and engagement, safeguarding diversity and inclusion, and mental health awareness and first aid. I'll come back to that marketing example shortly. Over to our coaches, we have a gender split of 73% female, male and 27% female, 9% from ethnically diverse communities. And the top three barriers to being an effective coach were, number one, a lack of additional experienced coaches. Translate that as having another set of hands to help you run the session. A lack of investment in equipment and the cost of training. So clearly more coaches are needed, something I will come back to shortly. The full report is available on our website under the Thames Vision. So top right hand corner of our website when you log on. So what have we done so far? So when we published the findings, we also opened a grant fund. Reflecting needs identified by the survey, the grant welcomed applications that would improve diversity of participation, particularly among underrepresented groups. And we also targeted workforce development, so helping support the work of coaches, administrators, and volunteers. As you heard already, marketing and engagement and safeguarding were skills missing, as was a lack of, and we identified a lack of additional coaches as well. So we've not got enough coaches out there. I'm very pleased to say that between the Active Thames partners, we managed to provide just over £90,000 to 24 organisations. Stiff competition, we had 77 applications, and the vast majority were very, very good. And there's a lot more that people want to do that they feel they're not able to do at the moment because they don't have the funding or support to do so. So hopefully we will find a way to support even more work. Images here are some of our recipients. So Black Girls Hike UK, they're a group of women who have a love of the outdoors, who'll be taking to the water to enjoy paddle sports this summer. They're hoping to get some of their group members trained up as paddle sports coaches as well. And then we have the Royal Dolphins in the middle there. That's a disability rowing group active at the Royal Docks. They take part in the Great River Race each year. And Islington Boat Club. They're just three of the examples that we have. Hopefully you have already seen some of the improvements we've made to the Boating on the Thames website. And we're pleased to say we have a website focused on promoting physical activity, and that's activethames.co.uk. That's quite new, just in the past couple of weeks, actually. So as you can see on the screen at the moment, sorry, it's a bit faded, but one of the key additions to this website is an activity finder. So we've worked with an organisation to provide a platform that will allow clubs to advertise and schedule and manage and even take payment for their Learn To courses and their taster sessions and things like that. So that's hopefully a really useful asset for clubs. And it also has a coaching database. So hopefully this will tackle some of the challenges identified in the survey around marketing and engagement. Pause for a second. Third topic which I'm covering this evening is Safer Thames. So that's the work of the Tidal Thames Water Safety Forum. You can see our partners at the top there, and we're very lucky to have the RNLI and the Met Police Marine Unit join us this evening to speak to you all. We're also working with London Fire Brigade, the Coast Guard, City of London Police, City of London Corporation, TfL, London Ambulance Service. I think I got everyone. Okay, so this is another partnership that's led by the PLA. Sadly, suicide remains the leading cause of drownings on the tidal Thames. We have around 30 deaths per year on the river, and the majority of those are suicide. In May 2019, we launched a drowning prevention strategy, setting out our commitment to work together to make the Thames a safer river and tackle some of the issues that we've seen. Touching just briefly on some of the achievements of the forum, we created a riverside design guide for developments along the river, so for people building alongside the water to understand how they can actually build safely and make sure that public rescue equipment is included in those plans. And we've worked with the Samaritans to create training for people working on or by the river who might come into contact with someone in crisis. This training equips them with the skills and also the confidence to intervene. And the Thames Skills Academy are now rolling this training out across the river. In the bottom left-hand corner there's online courses. And if anybody would like to book onto one of those, it's on the Thames Skills Academy website, along with lots of other interesting courses, actually. As an example of how we're adapting to behaviours, of course, the river was a new space for people discovering new sports in lockdown. We installed safety signs in the first lockdown, and one shown in the middle there, for people taking to the water who might perhaps not have been quite so aware of what they were taking on. We were trying to be as proactive about that as possible. As you can see there's a photo of one of our marine river inspectors educating river users on water safety. He's handing out a SUP leaflet, and as you can see there, paddleboarders having a lovely time but wearing an ankle leash and no buoyancy aid. We are pushing really strong on our messaging around quick released waist leashes only for stand-up paddleboarding on the Tideway, which is in line with British canoeing advice. And in fact, Miles and I went to an event at Parliament just 2 weeks ago to discuss this in light of some very sad cases of drownings via stand-up paddleboarding. We have a progress report online that shows the work of the forum over the past 2 years and tracks our development against our original strategy. So very transparent and accountable there. And if anybody is wishing to see more about the work of the forum, please do take a look at that. Just a couple of snapshots via image just here that show you what we're up to. As we were reminded by David earlier, please do continue to be our eyes and ears on the river and report any concerning behaviour to us. Can't underestimate that enough. It tells us the story as to what's going on out there and helps us track and monitor and respond to safety. So that's 3 themes there. The Thames Vision, please do take part in the consultation. Active Thames, our work in partnership to get more people actively using the river, and Safer Thames, the work of the Tidal Thames Water Safety Forum on drowning prevention. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting us along. Hopefully you find this interesting. I'm PC Paul Jacobs. My colleague hiding in the front there is PC Charmaine Boswava. What I'm going to give you is a little brief outline as to what the Marine Police Unit do, how you might see us out on the river, a little bit on counter-terrorism, and a little bit how you can help us with countering that and crime on the river as well. Thank you. Firstly, what we've got, hopefully, if technology allows us, we've got a little video, a birthday video from a few years ago, celebrating our few years on the river. So that's just a very small selection of a little bit of what we do. It's not every day that, but it's quite often. Obviously, we don't respond to every incident like that. So a little bit of history. We're quite proud of the fact that we predate the Met by a few years. 1798, we were formed basically by Patrick Colquhoun and John Harriot, who was a master mariner and a magistrate. They basically decided they'd got together with some of the users of the river who were fed up of losing up to about £500,000 a year in theft. So they decided to club together and come up with a policing plan for it, which was approved and put into action in 1798. Unfortunately, those that were pilfering didn't like that, so they rioted outside Wapping, roughly about 2,000 people. And that is where, unfortunately, our first officer was killed in the line of duty, is Gabriel Frank. So you'll notice a lot of our boats, that's how they get their names. Metropolitan Police was formed in 1829. That's where Sir Robert Peel got his idea from, was us. And so he decided to put that in action. We did name a boat after him. So then eventually we were incorporated into the MPS in 1839, part of Thames Division as it was then when we were all divisions. At our height, we had 6 police stations and moorings with over 250 officers. We've only now got 65 within that officers. But obviously, as things have developed landside, things have been co-located. We're now only at the one site in Wapping. Thames Division then ceased 1998 to become the MSU, but we are now renamed to reflect more of what we do. We are the Marine Policing Unit. And yes, we do support other units, but we are there to police the Thames as much as anything as well. So, Port of London, 96 miles, or 47 of which are in the MPS, second largest port in the UK, over 50 million tonnes of cargo per year, 30,000 commercial vessel movements from all over the world, 70,000 private vessel movements, 12 marinas. You can see all the numbers there. That's quite a bit to police. So as well as that, in geography terms, we're responsible for policing the entire Thames part within the MPS of Dartford Creek or Crayford Ness to Hampton Court. So that's a representative of those areas in between. So we are also there to prevent terrorist targets. There's a lot of iconic sites we have on the Thames, of which the Thames could be perceived as being a weak area. When you think when we've got hostile vehicle mitigation, as we call it, outside Houses of Parliament and things like that, when it comes to the river, it's pretty much an exposed area, hence why we're there. And some of the locations there that you can see that are iconic to London and would be potential targets. And all of which, crowded places, iconic sites, nighttime economy, all part of the critical national infrastructure and the transport infrastructure. Now, a terrorist, what he wants is somewhere that's crowded, and what COVID took away from them was crowded areas. Obviously, they're starting to come back now. We also know that the terrorists have been formulating their plans whilst they've been, secluded from the rest of the world through COVID. So that is something to be aware of. There are people out there wishing to do us harm, and they will start to try and look to put possibly some of their plans into fruition. So how we're made up in the MPU is we've got a 24/7 response and patrol capability. We also have the tactical marine skills capability, more of what you saw in the video there. We also have our dive team. They also deal with confined searches as well, but we are the contingency for dealing with searches at height and what we call line access, so abseiling or climbing up to high search areas such as Wembley, Wembley Arena, places like that. We will be doing that search capability there as well. Okay, so as well as that, we've also, as well as the Thames, we also have all the other waterways, which is 250 miles of navigable canals, creeks and inlets, and any enclosed waters, ponds, lakes and reservoirs. So we will deal with all of that on top of the Thames as well. So, as I said there, 24/7 response. And also, obviously, the bolt on there is terrorism, is patrolling that area against terrorist attack. How that's made up, that's a little bit of what we do, just our day shift, if you like, and night shift. We will deal with anything within from any calls that we get. So if you see something, please call it in. Don't think that we're too busy or we haven't got the time. We'd rather know about it than not. So no matter how small you think it is, please call that in to us. As you can see there, we will do lots of things as well as patrolling, as reassurance. Jenny, we have got a lot in the way of body recovery. Unfortunately, that's such a quite nice end of the job, really, but it is something that we do deal with. So a little bit on what the underwater and confined space search team do, or the dive team. We keep these guys in the basement. They're not here, so I can say that. Something to do with them getting the bends if they go up to the 3rd floor or something. So it's not, it's a unique position. That's how they're made up. Basically, 1 sergeant and 9 officers. They do the 10-hour shifts, 7 till 5, mainly weekdays, but they will come out on a weekend, obviously, when they're scheduled to do so. They will get called in to do specialist searches on crime scenes and things like that. Obviously, if there's any evidence that's been seen to be discarded in waterways, they will be called out to deal with that and do the search. They're all qualified, or most of them are fully qualified boat handlers as well. So as well as doing all of their training for the boats, they also get their commercially endorsed dive certificates as well, which is quite a feat, really, as well. Certainly not something that appeals to me. Certainly along from the confined space bit, that's something not for me either. But it is a unique position, and you've got to have the right attitude for it. So that, as I say, they're all commercial divers. That's what's required to do one dive. So you've got your safety briefs there as well as your divers. Some of the areas they do, it's not turning up with flip-flops on a beach with a towel and snorkeling. That's the sort of stuff they do, some of the lesser delightful places of London. That's a sort of an example of some of the areas that they have to go. That's the sort of things they bring up when they're wearing. They didn't go in like that, I might add you. And again, the confined space do a lot of work with Thames waterways, with the sewage works there. Another area of, as I say, the confined search. And again, another example of some of the areas that they have to frequent. Looks a lot of fun, it is, but it does smell and you can't get rid of the smell for days. Stop clicking. There we go. And that's an example. It is not just all giggles. They do find stuff more often than not. Bearing in mind that most of it being in tidal areas or whatever, and some of the less desirable places are pretty much zero visibility at all. There's nothing to see. It is all by feel. So then we have the line access or searching at height. So as I said, they provide a defensive search at height as well. evidence recovery at height, protester removal capability. So if we do, as we've seen with Extinction Rebellion, some of those have come up with some ingenious ideas of how to disrupt us, but we will deal with that as well when it's at height. There we go, is Wimbledon. As an example of some of the areas that they will actually search. An example of them also doing a little bit of training there on recovery. So the slightly less nice part, shall we say, is the difficult subject of terrorism and the current threat. So anyone have an idea of what the current threat to the UK is from international terrorism? Not actually, it is substantial at the moment. It went down a month or so ago. But an attack is still likely. It's not highly likely, but it is still likely. So that is above the norm still. You know, there is, as I say, there is potential out there. So we need you out there to be our eyes and ears to spot anything suspicious, and more on that in a moment. So an idea of the current threat, that's an example of some of the more recent incidents. So we had two there in in fairly close proximity, the Poppy Day. Now we all know about that in the news, that he'd pretty much self-radicalized online, and there was not really that much known about him. And then of course, what we have there, the last one, terror at the Teen concert, the Ariana Grande concert. And something that's come out of that, with the inquiry, is the fact that generally speaking, there was a very poor kind of standard of response with regards to counterterrorism. A lot of people certainly noticed a few things, made people aware, and felt that it possibly wasn't followed up in the best way that it could have been done. And that's mainly because it was fairly dismissive on the part of some of the organisers, so to speak, some of the security firms, where it was that very much brush off online capability of counterterrorism training. As you know, throughout COVID, obviously people haven't been in person, but they did tend to say, well, they've done a bit, but it was a very, very quick click-through presentation on their phone, rather than actually making sure that anything went into them. And ultimately, did any of those staff want that to happen? Of course not. But obviously in an inquiry, it's very damning when they're all there and everyone's saying, well, I put it to you, sir, madam, that you could have done more, but you didn't. And ultimately, obviously, they didn't want that to be the result. Could they have done more? Possibly. Could they have followed stuff up better? Probably. But ultimately, that's part of what we do, is to come out, speak to people and make sure they have the confidence to actually deal with it. So current threat mainly is from Islamist terrorism. As we've seen in the news, as I say, it's still very much out there. We still do have a threat from Northern Irish related terrorism. They haven't gone away. It's not quite the bad old days of the 70s and 80s. They still do have some form of desire, but not quite so much the capability, but it's still very much there. And of course, if we're in Northern Ireland, they will get their risk is that little bit higher, and it's pretty much every day that security forces and that are having to check their vehicles and things for any devices. We then have extreme right-wing terrorism and extreme left-wing terrorism, but also anarchist and single-issue terrorism. But what we also include in that is some of the protester stuff, though, although it's not anyone trying to kill anyone, they are there to disrupt. And again, this is where we come to you with stuff that you may spot, and we want you to notify us of. So, as I alluded to there, maritime protest, it's an emerging trend. Extinction Rebellion are an ingenious lot, and they are starting to develop things towards disrupting our waterways, which, again, they're not after killing anyone, but they are there in a very disruptive capacity. So this one here is 2017 Greenpeace, the Elbe Highway in Sheerness, campaign against diesel, and they managed to get that banner up onto that ship, okay? What they had done is extensive training beforehand, and these are done in out of the way places that yourselves possibly would have noticed, okay? People training, doing stuff that's a little bit out of the norm, and they might have sparked some interest, but these are highly trained individuals. They are professionals at what they do. So there would have been possibly someone who could have seen something and maybe been able to, report it and do something about it. But as I say, they are extremely well trained, and they want to succeed. They want to get notoriety for it. 2019, Extinction Rebellion again, campaign against cruise industry pollution. Again, what that says there, low sophistication, high impact. Okay, so it was highly disruptive, but it took zero effort really as such. It wasn't an elaborate plan. And they had then found that Ocean Rebellion in Falmouth have started to follow tactics. And what I will say, when they're watching this, who else might be watching a protester carrying out stuff and thinking, well, if they can get away with it, what can I do? You're terrorist. Okay, they will be seeing this sort of thing and thinking, well, actually, that's a really good idea. Didn't think of that. I'll give it a go. And then following their example. So there as well, a little fact is that we have the second largest number of cruise ship arrivals in Europe. Example there of the ship. And if you can see there, all they did was float out on lilos and tether themselves to the front of the ship, which disrupted it long enough that they couldn't set sail. Obviously, they had the safety in mind of the individuals at the front there as well. What you can't quite make out there, it's actually someone dressed in a polar bear outfit, stood on the bow of that ship. And that, as I say, very simple, but grounded and obviously disrupted that cruise quite considerably, costing a lot of money. Greenpeace again, campaign against fossil fuel, use of large and small protest vessels, combined with rope skill and lock-on techniques. 8 days this disrupted. Okay, so that rig was being towed out. Greenpeace saw that and decided to put themselves in the way. So they stayed there for a bit and then they listened to a little bit of persuasion and off they went and everything was hunky-dory and they thought, oh good, they've gone. But then a smaller boat come back and then managed to get people on board where they locked on and of course disrupted it further. As you can see there, that's them deploying the smaller vessel up to once they've gone, but then deploying it back up to the rig. Now this here is what we spotted them training on the Thames. Okay, so what you can see is them doing some work off of a bridge there. Obviously that's us on one of our ribs, and we noticed that, took photos, because a little bit later in Scotland, they did that. Another reason why our fuel costs are going up. So again, French fishing vessels, this is something else again for terrorist organisations. If they're seeing any of this, it's an idea for them of how they might be able to facilitate something. But French fishing vessels basically decided to blockade St Helier, Jersey, protesting fishing quota as a result of the EU's or our exit from the EU. So you can see there, they basically just flooded the area. So it meant that it caused widespread disruptions there. And that was an example. Now, again, that might have been something that you out and about may have spotted. What's that? It's a large amount of vessels, something like that. Again, we want to know about it. I appreciate that's a bit further afield in Jersey, but it's that sort of example that you will see. You're the ones out there all the time, you know, that are seeing the stuff that when we're busy inland or whatever, and you will spot that. Please let us know. So lastly, that should be, again, down at G7, very, very simple. They put up some inflatables outside of the one of the cruise ships there. Again, low sophistication, high impact, and all they did was project that onto the ship. So it's highly visible. And again, it's the other side of it. Yes, it was very disruptive, but also potential for the slightly more hostile people to see that as a good example. It's really good for them to start thinking, actually, I could put that into fruition and think of the damage they could cause by doing something slightly more sinister. So moving on, a little bit on theft and stolen vessels and engines. What we've been informed is that less than 1 in 3 UK stolen outboard motors are actually ever recovered. We actually have a very poor recording system of notifying or taking a record of serial numbers and things like that. So when they do go missing, it's quite smooth. We can't, the police and various forces can't record it with all the details. So if they do come across one, they can't actually trace it back very easily. All this is actually on the National Maritime website. No surprise, a lot are exported to Europe. But as I said there, it will hinder any recovery and investigation. And of course, guess where it leads? Not all of them, of course, but we do know of people that are selling legitimately and innocently selling ribs, outboards and what have you to individuals. And they are then being traced back from Dover, Dungeness and things like that. They're being traced back to having been sold in this country or stolen from this country. And of course, it very much reaches a dead end if we can't then trace it back further. So at least, even if you've sold it legitimately, but we could come back to you and say, who did you sell it to? And we can then maybe do a little bit further investigation as to who that possible person was, whether they were a trafficker, whether they were in, helping or assisting traffickers in any way. But all that just helps no end in our investigation, and of course preventing some of them being able to facilitate their way at risk to themselves more than anything to our shores. So please do something. If you think it's not quite right, just report it. Don't worry that you think it's nothing. We'd rather know about it than not. Anything suspicious, people lurking around your marinas that you think, well, I don't recognise them, who are they? Go up to them and ask. Something that in a former role, one of the things I used to have to do, still do a little bit of, is hostile reconnaissance and actually look and see how I could infiltrate somewhere. And the one thing that goes through your mind is that I don't want anyone to speak to me. I don't want anyone to talk to me when I'm doing that, because I want to be able to get as much information as I can without being spotted. So someone coming up and saying, hello, sir, can I help you? I hate it, okay? And even though if I'm really well prepared for it and thinking I've got a cover story, I'm not going to want to stay there for much longer and I want to get out. Okay, now I'm not saying that you're going to come across and, oh, look, there's someone suspicious, they're a terrorist, definite, but just general crime as well. If there's people lurking about on your marinas or on your jetties and you don't recognise them, it could just be a friendly mariner who's, a new occupant, who's got a new berth or something there, but ultimately, the idea that people are the eyes and ears there and that you're actually looking out. Okay, certainly if you saw someone snooping around on someone else's boat that you knew and you didn't recognise them, I'm sure you'd probably say, can I help you? Or at the very least, you'd want the same reciprocated for one of your vessels. If there was people when you're not there looking around your boat, it could be innocent, it could be they're looking to buy it or whatever, but at the same time, we do know that they are looking at the out of the way places because they're not on the radar and they could look to maybe use vessels and what have you to get further in to the capital or for other means as well. So if you do see it, please, 999, call it in. It's always been 999, still will be. You can text it. Okay, it's not widely publicised, but mainly if you feel this is more to do with if you're in an area where you think picking up your phone and actually dialing the number might put you at risk, you can text 999 with your details as to what you're seeing. So if you're on a late night train and there's a load of drunk and whatever people and you're on the same carriage, but you don't want to give yourself away, but you think it needs to be called in, obviously you've got the PTP text number, but you've also got 999. You do need to register for it first. So you don't want to be registering for it in anger when you're thinking, I'm on the police. And then, so all you need to do is just type the word register to the number 999 and they'll come back with a text to make sure that you do want to register, and that's it. And then all you need to do is just text those details to 999 in the case of an emergency if you need to. Obviously, the preferred way is to call it in because they can get more fast time information, but likewise, it's all there. We did have an incident at London, the last London Bridge attack, where one of the it was the Fishmonger School one, where the individual spotted the suspect, but was worried that by picking up his phone and actually bringing it out, he was going to actually draw attention to himself. And he particularly said, well, if I'd known that, I could have maybe texted that at the time. So as I say, it is there, but if you do see it, please let us know. And there you have a more slow time response there. The action counters terrorism. If there's anything you want to report, you can do it slow time on there, or you can call in the 0800 number. It's all anonymous, but that, again, if you saw someone there and then on your jet and you didn't like the look of them, it's 999. And the reason for that is that it will get a fast time response for, be it landside officers to attend. And if we know that it's something that, you know, the suspect, whatever, is making off in the water, then we also get the response from the Marine Policing Unit as well. So what 3 words? Again, we recommend that, you know, in the heat at the moment, you might not be fully aware of where you are, but what 3 words? It's a free app on your phone. I'm sure you've probably seen some of the adverts, but it's basically mapped the entire world in 3 meter squares, and it'll give a unique 3-letter word, random letter words for that area. And no area is the same. So me standing here will be slightly different to your one over there. But as I say, it's well worth having, because certainly it can pinpoint resources to you should you need them. Now, lastly, we are a highly trained police force. It's 2 years just to get a your boatmaster's license. And what you see, we are at the pinnacle of training. And as you can see there, a bit of a situation where we have an upturned rib and how to write it. So, of course, you can see this is the expert way of how to write. Oh, no. Will it play? I know the gentleman at the back said he could possibly press play. Or not. I've set it up for a fail now. See, I'm building up too much now. The anticipation, isn't it? No, okay, I'm being directed from the back. We can't play it. Needless to say, he doesn't do it, and he goes straight in. So thank you very much for your time. Just imagine it. If it was say, we're happy to answer any questions at the end. But ultimately, if you see something, please do not hesitate to call it in. Don't think you're making a fuss over it. We want to know. We'd rather know that it's nothing, rather than it turns out that no one called us and we've ended up having to deal with something that could have been prevented. Thank you very much for your time.
It looks like I'm on next then. The bloke in the big yellow, big red jacket. Good evening. Technology. Can you hear me okay? Thank you. Green one to go. I'm Stephen Wheatley, as you might have guessed, from the RNLI. It's pretty obvious, really, isn't it? Did get some odd looks coming here on my scooter, I have to say, but well worthwhile to be here. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you to PLA for giving me, or giving the RNLI the opportunity to come and talk to you this evening. I'm a volunteer crew member at Tower Lifeboat along the river next to Waterloo Bridge in front of Somerset House. And I'm here representing the 5,500 volunteer crew for the RNLI around the country. So on their behalf, thank you for giving us this platform. A little bit of history. The RNLI was founded in 1824. We're going to be 200 years old in 2 years' time, and we're planning for that. The mission of the RNLI is to provide a world-class marine life-saving service wherever it is required. So it's worth remembering that. We have 238 stations. Those stations are in England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and Eire, where surprisingly it's still called the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, which you might be surprised at. 448 lifeboats, 163 of them are all-weather boats, so classic lifeboats that you see. They're not always slipway launched anymore, often on tractors. 285 inshore lifeboats and 7 hovercraft. Does anybody know where the nearest hovercraft is to here? Yeah, so use hovercraft where there are large expanses of mud, where the tide comes in very quickly, and you might be required to do that type of rescue. 5,600 volunteers, 3,500 shore crew, bless them, because they turn out to a shout and they get the boat launched, and then they sit there and wait for the boat to come back. And when it comes back, they refuel it and they wash it and they clean it and then they put it back in its hutch. And they don't get to do the thing I feel which is exciting, which is to assist on a shout, but they're very, very important nonetheless. In 2020, the RNLI did 239 shouts, and it costs about £180 million a year to run. What's important about that is we don't get a single penny from Her Majesty's government to run the RNLI. And we're not part of a government institution, which I think is probably a good thing. So we call that big RNLI. Now let's look at something which is a bit more local. Let's look at the RNLI on the Thames, because that's what we're all interested in, really, isn't it? So there's stations at Gravesend, Tower, Chiswick, and at Teddington. Gravesend, known as the deep end, Tower, Chiswick, known as the shallow end, and then Teddington, the very shallow end. The three stations, Gravesend, Tower, and Chiswick, are manned stations. They're manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the reason for that is that we have to be on service, which is bell goes, 90 seconds later, we have let go the lines and we're on our way. And as our colleagues in the Met Police will confirm, no doubt, your survival time, if you jump in the river and you happen to be hanging onto a chain, probably is in minutes rather than in hours. And depending on water temperature, could be very low number of minutes. We have to be there very quickly. And so we go on the station, we do 12-hour shifts, start at 7 in the morning, finish at 7 at night, or go on at 7 at night and finish at 7 in the morning. And off we go running around. The reason we're manned in that state is because we do 600 jobs a year. So just think about that for a second. So that's nearly 2 a day. The Tower Lifeboat Station does 6% of all of the RNLI's 8,239 jobs. Just think about that. If it was equal, each station do 0.4%. So we do 6%. So we need something like 17 or 18 times the amount of jobs that an average lifeboat station would do. More remarkably, we do 23% of all of the RNLI's medical interventions. They're taking place on the river. So what do we get to do? Well, the shouts include people in the water. We don't ask them how they get in the water. The reasons can sometimes be complex and sometimes the outcomes are tragic. Broken down boats. Broken down boats. Don't let this haunt you. Don't break down. Injured or sick people on boats. Don't get ill on a boat. Okay. Animals in the water. Why do we recover animals from the water? Because if we don't, somebody else is going to, aren't they? And then we've got 2 problems. We've got a very angry animal and a very upset person. We've had all sorts, dogs, cats, foxes. Why would we do that? Because there were 25 people staring at this fox down just below Tower Bridge that was standing on an island that was getting increasingly small. And one chap was taking his clothes off because he was going to go and get it. The most obscure animal we've rescued is a Harris hawk. It was being used to scare pigeons, and it chased a pigeon, became waterlogged, and they're not aquatic birds. And it was quite a strange thing to see a Harris hawk on a lifeboat. People in dangerous places out of the water. That could be because it's going to lead to that. And what we like to do is get there first because we much prefer a dry casualty. So we like you very, very much, but we really, really, really want to avoid you. And you want to avoid us. So you do us a favor and try and avoid us. Okay? So here's some things, with apologies for slightly repeating stuff you've heard before. Wear a life jacket or a buoyancy aid. Hands up all those really strong swimmers in the room. It's not a trick, come on, if you're a strong swimmer. How good are you when you're unconscious? Point made? Okay, get your life jacket serviced. I was invited to go on a cruise with a friend, gave me a life jacket. I said, no, I've got my own. I then looked at his life jackets. They were out of date. So we did 2 things. One, we went to the marina and we got the service kit. And then I said to him, have you ever seen one of these go off? And he said, no. So I videoed it. I should have implanted it. It's absolutely hysterical. This is about this big and it goes off with a hell of a noise. and quite a bang. It's quite spectacular. So if your jacket's out of date, fire it, doesn't do them any harm, and then send it and get it serviced. Make sure it's in date. Carry means of calling for help, and make sure that everybody on board knows how to use it. How many people have got radio certificates? Excellent. What happens if you're the person that's injured? Okay. Format the call for a mayday or a pan-pan and leave it next to the radio so that anybody, a 10-year-old child could do it. As a person with a radio certificate, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can supervise somebody else making a radio call, correct? When you go with a new crew that you don't know about their competence, get them to do the radio check under your supervision. So the first time they do it isn't the time there's water pouring in the side of the boat and you're lying on the deck unconscious. Okay? Simple things. Consider having an additional message like the RYA app, register your vessel with the Coast Guard, tell somebody where you're going and when you should be back in case something happens and you haven't communicated, and they can let us know or the police know, and we'll go out and start looking for you. Mobile phones in waterproof pockets are really useful. And if you've got a life jacket like this with pockets in it, put your waterproof phone in your pocket. Because if you go over the side, you've at least got your phone with you. Have a grab bag. How many people here have got grab bags? Okay, sensible, put a radio in it, but going back to the first speaker, make sure the batteries in the radio that's in the grab bag are charged, because that would be foolish, wouldn't it? Right, so only one more to go. Ensure the major systems well maintained, working, and you know how to use them. Use a checklist. So who uses checklists? Airline pilots. Who in here uses checklists? We go on duty, and the first thing we do is we use a 80-90 point checklist to check the boat has got everything on it it should have, and it's all in working order. And we do it twice a day. So even though we're familiar with it, it just makes sure that you don't make mistakes. Do a safety briefing. Maybe even if you've got new crew coming on your boat and they're not familiar with it, get them to do part of the checklist, because that will increase their familiarity. Carry the spares you need. Obviously, make sure you don't have any problems in the first place, but if you do, make sure you've got the sort of things that you might need to repair it. Check fuel not contaminated. Obviously, make sure you've got enough fuel to get where you're going. Wear a kill cord. Anybody familiar with the tragic situation in Padstow about 7 years ago? Very accomplished boater, out with his wife and children. He didn't go home. One of his kids didn't go home, and his wife lost her legs. Wear a kill cord. Sorry, I don't want to lecture you, but that's, it's just so obvious, isn't it? It's there for a purpose. Develop the skills, those your crew, practice man overdrawn. Right, okay. This is Tower Lifeboat Station, if you didn't recognize it. It was refurbished in 2005. The Metropolitan Police sold it to us for £1. They knew what they were doing. This bit here is 160 years old, and it's been there since Joseph Bazalgette did the embankment. It's currently out of warranty. Disgusting, cheap, nasty Victorian engineering. This pier has to be replaced. It has to be replaced soon. It's going to be replaced later this year. So that's the current pier. So it currently costs £500,000 to run the pier. The station, the pontoon you've just seen is 160 years old, has to be replaced. Unfortunately, it's going to cost us £8 million to change it, and we're raising money for that. So if you've got £8 million you'd like to find a home for, we'd be very, very grateful indeed. It would be the most effective donation you could make to the RNLI. Because if you think about it, it's £8 million over 100 to 120 years, which is the expected life as a replacement. That is a hell of an investment and very efficient. I don't mind if you've got £8. Scan the QR code, make a donation, gift aid it, we'd appreciate it. It's pure coincidence that the screenshot that Jenny took of this Just Giving page has a donor, Stephen Wheatley, at the top of it. I'd only just noticed that. Yes, on behalf of a Masonic Lodge gave us 75 quid. Okay, That's what we're going to spend £8 million on. Two things. One, it's a lot further out from the embankment wall, which will stop it from slamming. At the moment, we experience vibration on the pier of between 4 and 5 on the Richter scale. The advice is, if you're in an earthquake of that magnitude, is stand outside because things will fall off. And we live there for 12 hours under those circumstances. Bringing it away from the wall, like Woods Pier next door, stops it from doing that. Twice the size gives us more capability. And finally, we can't have visitors on the pier because it's out of warranty. And however, when the new pier arrives, I'd like to extend an invitation to this group to come on an organised visit to Tower Lifeboat Station. Thank you very much for your attention.
And I work in the environment team in the PLA as the technical advisor for water quality. And today I'm going to be speaking to you about the PLA's work regarding litter in the Thames. So just to start off, as Jenny mentioned earlier with regards to our Thames Vision 2050, we conducted lots of different research. And as part of that, we did a public perception survey. And this was a piece of research that the PLA commissioned among people living, working near the tidal River Thames in London, South Essex and North Kent to explore the public's perception of the tidal Thames. And as you probably well know, the natural Thames is a key way that people engage with the river because it's a cooling spot, it's a clear airspace, and it's a lovely place for people to come and enjoy. But in the public perception survey, as you can see from the graph on the left, pollution was the single most association with the river when unprompted. But when asked what the priority should be for the Thames, the environment was the clear standout as the key priority for the Thames. So in terms of pollution, the PLA works really closely on issues relating to water quality, and this includes oil pollution and sewage. But another area that we work very closely on is targeting litter in the Thames. We remove 200 tonnes of rubbish annually from the River Thames, which costs up to £1 million. And we also work closely with organisations such as Thames 21 and others to help with their cleanups. And another reason why this is so important is a study by the Royal Holloway University and the Natural History Museum found that up to 70% of fish in the Thames had plastic fibres in their guts, which can actually enter the human food chain. And another reason why tackling litter is crucial is because the Thames is home to thriving habitats for fish, birds, seals, and other wildlife. In terms of the Thames, it has several international protected sites, and actually 92% of the PLA's area is covered by a form of environmental designation. And ultimately, higher water quality means more biodiversity. The Thames is already home to 125 species of fish and visits from over 300,000 overwintering birds every year. But it's so crucial that we help protect the environment, because with climate change will come warmer, bigger waves, increased flooding, sea level rise, and this can impact habitats. We'll have changes in species. Some will adapt, but others will be driven out, and some will be completely removed. And the PLA works closely with organisations such as the RSPB and the Wildlife Trusts to undertake habitat restoration projects in the Thames, because these habitats are really crucial. So in terms of what we do to tackle litter, really tackling litter in the Thames needs a holistic approach from all the organisations involved. And so in 2014, the PLA set up the Thames Litter Forum, which is a group of non-governmental organisations, academics, river operators, businesses that all help to tackle litter in the Thames. And this forum helped provide a network of all these groups where we can help facilitate research and action on the Thames. Then in 2015, the PLA and several other partners launched the Cleaner Thames campaign, which was really aiming to help Londoners do the right thing and put their rubbish in the bin before it reached the river. And we got a lot of positive perception from this campaign. Then in 2018, with the Thames Litter Forum, we published the Thames Litter Strategy, which was to outline the actions that the forum would take to help tackle litter in the Thames. And not finally, but another thing that we did in last year was we launched the Thames Environment Fund, which was to help support small-scale projects that will help deliver actions relating to litter. And we helped fund organisations such as the Ahoy Centre, Active 360 and ZSL. So in terms of this is the sort of actions that we've taken to help improve litter on the Thames, but really it's a real collaborative approach rather than just one organisation. And in terms of the many ways that you can get involved with helping remove litter from the Thames is in 2020, we launched our Cleaning the Thames website, which is to help connect volunteers and those wanting to undertake cleanups on the Thames to a near riverside cleanup to them. So you can, on the website, you can browse nearby cleanups and contact organisers that are planning litter picks near you, which are all approved by the PLA. And also this website will enable you to help run your own cleanup events if you would so desire. So thank you very much for listening. Very brief overview, but like it says on the slide, if you'd like any further information, please contact us. Thank you.
Thanks very much to all of the speakers. I have to say I was really disappointed that we didn't see that expert dinghy writing demonstration. But yeah, I hope that you found all of those of interest and you do have some burning questions. Just before we go to the questions, just like to take the opportunity to mention the exhibition on the ground floor, London Port City. Hopefully some of you got the opportunity to have a look at that before you came in. But if you didn't, then I would thoroughly recommend it. It's a really interesting exhibition that encompasses some of the PLA's archive, which is held here in the museum. And it's running until the 8th of May, I believe. So not all that much time left to view it. So I would thoroughly recommend that. So now turning to any questions that you may have in the room or online.
Just to mention for anybody online, if you could please add your questions to the box that says Q&A. Perhaps you might have put one through earlier. It's not currently showing, so if anybody online does have a question, please pop it in now into the Q&A and answer that. Over to our audience.
Thank you very much for this evening. Peter Finch, Hurlingham Yacht Club and River Thames Society. Before I ask the question, I just like, because it's the first time we've really met together as a group for a long time, I'd just like to express my regret at the passing of Harbour Master Mark Towns, who played a fantastic role on the river for many years and particularly in his support for recreational boaters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter.
My question really, this is something actually Mark was looking into at one time. We're always talking about the lack of moorings, and one potential mooring place was at Woolwich. Next to the current Woolwich pier, there was a long pier, most of which unfortunately has been dismantled in recent times, but it was there, I think, for the Olympics and for the Jubilee event. potentially it could be really good pier for visiting boats. And Mark was, at the time, I think it was English Countryside who owned it. I think now it's London Borough of Greenwich. I just wonder if any progress has been made in relation to that particular jetty. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you for that, Peter. The answer is I don't know specifically about that facility. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the Tall Ships Festival does use Woolwich Pier, and there were some piles that were put in for that. I'm not sure if that's quite what you're referring to. Yeah, okay. So we can definitely take that away because that's not something I was aware of, and we can speak to the council, who you rightly say control that. So yeah, we'll be in touch and find out the answer for you on that one. Thank you. Did see some other hands in the front row. Just wait for the microphone. Thanks.
Fine, that's it. Good. Yep. Okay. Lionel Willis, Greenwich Yacht Club. I was interested in the Assistant Harbour Master's speech at the very beginning, when he was saying that you should, if you get towed ashore, you have to find yourself an engineer or a tow vehicle. And I'd just like to make an observation. I'm sure most of the members of the Tidal Thames Club will bear me out here. That information used to be in the very useful tide tables, which members of the Tidal Thames Club used to get every year, but didn't get this year. Why was that?
Jenny, do you want to tackle that one?
Yep, me to blame on that one, Lionel. So we do have the PLA app now, which I don't think we did when we were first issuing the tide tables, and there are some useful digital tools out there as well. We're able to purchase it for £3 from the PLA shop, which I don't think covers costs at our end even, actually. And you can download PDFs from the website as well. So if it needs to come back by popular demand of presenting them at this event, we could perhaps bring them along for people who come. I think we were issuing a hell of a lot of them without them necessarily being collected at the other end.
Just
not cost saving, not penny pinching, more not printing so much if it's not needed.
And just one point on actual tide predictions themselves. Appreciate what you're saying about the other information that's in there. We do have a really great website, tidal predictions.pla.co.uk, I think it is, where you can get the tide at any location for many years into the future. So there is a lot of information out there. I believe there was another question in the front row.
Thank you. David Leppard, St Pancras Cruising Club. I'm not expecting a direct answer for this, but it concerns or is related to our first questioner as well about safe moorings. As people will know, Gravesend Pier is changing hands and terms have been agreed to sell it to Uber. We're trying to establish what requirements Uber might have to keep public moorings available. They've been very positive in their responses, but it would be very useful to know from a PLA licensing point of view whether there are any restrictions to be placed to enable safe moorings to continue to be available. So perhaps if we can liaise offline on that one, Miles, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to the licensing team about that one. As you say, so that facility would have a Riverworks license, which may have some conditions attached to it, which would probably be transferred over. As I say, we can get you an answer on that specifically. Further questions? The gentleman in the waistcoat.
Yes, in the presentation Active Thames, I thought I saw natural flood defence. What is natural flood defence?
Emily or Jenny, who wants to answer that one?
I'm probably not the best expert on the natural flood defence, but my understanding is in terms of You have hard flood defences along the Thames currently, which are what you see as the walls. And there are lots of natural habitats that act as natural flood defences. And so the idea around a natural flood defence is restoring those habitats, because that is what they originally would do in terms of previously. And that would mean that we would be restoring what the Thames naturally was previously in terms of a flood storage. So it is, instead of having hard walls along the Thames as a flood defence, you have softer, and you are improving biodiversity by creating new habitats as well as keeping those flood defence features.
Thanks very much, Emily. Any further questions?
We've got one online. Is it necessary for a yacht to report on entry to the Thames?
Okay, so the answer to that one is it's not a requirement, but we would always encourage people to use our vessel traffic services, which I'm sure you've heard of, which is, we always use that analogy of air traffic control on the water. Obviously, they primarily deal with the large commercial ships, but that service is there for all mariners, and very welcome to speak to them on the radio. And especially, for example, if you ever had an issue, you're caught in fog or something like that, then they can provide you with navigational assistance. So yes, you're most welcome to report, but not required to. The gentleman in the second row.
Mike's coming across to you.
Yeah, hello, my name is Ian Gilbert. I represent the Association of Dunkirk Little Ships, with boats nearly as ancient as myself. We often transit the tidal Thames, and very often when I'm going out to Queenborough or Ramsgate, the worst conditions I experience are that section downstream from Tower Bridge. And that's brought about by the ribs that run down there. This was a subject that came up at the last two meetings that I attended. What are the conditions that you put on the skippers of those ribs? Are they qualified? I mean, the people that go on those ribs go for an exciting experience, and they don't get that by just poodling along at 5 knots. And it looked like my friend at from the Metropolitan Police had also qualified as one of those rib drivers. It causes a huge, huge inconvenience, and it's continual. And I personally would like to see it stopped. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, just to address that one. So on the Thames, there is a 12-knot speed limit between Margaret Ness and Putney. But within that area, there is something called the Certificate of Compliance. And if vessels wish to exceed that speed limit in certain controlled areas, then they have to go through that process of obtaining a certificate of compliance for the vessel. And that will address things like the qualifications of the skipper, but also the vessel itself. So to answer the question on qualifications, yes, they do have to be qualified. And any vessel that operates commercially does have to have a local knowledge endorsement to operate in that area as well. And then, as I say, in terms of the vessel itself, that has to carry certain equipment, and also have to submit a passage plan that has to be approved by the harbour master. There are specific areas that are identified for the high-speed thrill manoeuvres that you've described, and there's certain areas where that is not allowed. I think the final point I would make is, if you have experienced an issue where you feel that you've been put in danger, and as my colleague David said, please do report it to us, because that can help build up evidence of there being an issue. And finally, there are obviously bylaws and rules in place about wash that is endangering other river users. So if there was an issue where somebody had been endangered, and we could potentially address it in that way. So as I say, the message from David, please report problems that you encounter.
Does anyone have any questions of the Met Police or RNLI or Cleaning the Thames as well, who are here this evening? there any questions on those topics?
Peter Cox from the Shockley Point Yacht Club. For the question for the police, is Project Kraken now dead? Haven't heard anything about it for years now.
It's certainly not dead. They are looking at
Yeah, it's certainly not dead. We are looking at, obviously with funding it, looking at rebranding a little bit, keeping the name, but ultimately just rejigging things a little bit, like making sure that, people are aware of it, certainly, and just coming out again, obviously through COVID, is making sure that people are in fact aware of it as well. But this is all in conjunction with a lot of the other things that we're doing as well, which basically is if you see anything, report it. Yes, Kraken's got its own tagline as such, but ultimately it's around, if you see anything, please let us know. I know there's lots of talk about police cuts and things like that, but am I wasting someone's time? And only today we were City Cruises talking about suspicious items, and obviously people are worried about money. People are worried about making that call where they're saying, I spotted a suspicious item, I think it might be something, but I'm potentially taking money away from business by shutting it down for a short-term period of time whilst it's dealt with. Honestly, it's far better that if you see it, report it, whatever it is, and we'll act upon it. And so if it turns out to be nothing, it turns out to be nothing. No one's going to sit there and going, well, that was a waste of time, thanks very much. We're not like that. That's not what we're going to do. Yes, it might be at a time when we're particularly busy, but anything there, 999, if it's slightly more slow time, certainly, you can do it on 101, but ultimately don't lose sleep over, well, they're here now, is it urgent? Just, let us know. We can't do anything. As I've all said, if it's not reported, we can't do anything about it. So if it's just a general trend of crime, certain things you're seeing, please don't think, oh, well, everyone's recording it or someone else must have recorded it. If you've noticed it, please make a log of it, let us know, because then that way, when we can collate everything and go, right, they are being hit with houseboat theft and burglaries, and we can then, tailor our patrols to concentrate on that area for a bit. But ultimately, yeah, it is still around, but it just needs a little bit of tweaking.
Thanks very much, Paul.
I have a question here to ask if there is a suitable, a list of suitable berths for visiting yachts. Yes, on the Boating on the Thames website, there is a section titled Moorings, which has information on there. Spoke to colleagues just last week after it was flagged around some moorings that aren't currently showing, which we need to add to that. So there's a project underway to make sure that is up to date and accurate. And then I think just one more question here, Hammersmith Bridge. Brian Bowles, recreational boater. I appreciate that London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham have responsibility, but what is the position regarding Hammersmith Bridge?
It's difficult to answer that without any further context. But yeah, as the questioner identified, it is the responsibility of the London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham. The PLA worked extremely hard to reopen the bridge to navigation after it was effectively closed by the council. And we now have a system in place with a traffic light system where in the event of any alarm being activated, which indicated there was a risk, then that would automatically close the bridge to navigation. Fortunately, we haven't had that situation. So yeah, the PLA is committed to ensuring that anything that goes there or any works that take place will be done in a way that maintains safe navigation. And we are here to advocate for the river users in that respect.
Thank you very much, Miles. I think that brings us to an end in terms of questions. Thank you to those submitted online as well.
And just thank you once again to all of our speakers, and thank you all for attending this evening. I hope that you have enjoyed it. And as Jenny said, there's more information available online on the website. Oh, and that's really, I didn't know we had that slide. Fortuitous. These are the ways that you can keep in contact with us. So yes, thank you very much, everyone, and wish you a safe journey home.